Act 1, Scene 7 is one of the first really pivotal scenes in the play. It's the point at which Macbeth makes his decision, finally, that he's going to murder Duncan, whatever happens. So the rest of the play kind of moves from here. In many ways, you could argue that this is the play in which his hubris takes hold, his act against what is right. Now, the structure of it is very much one of these ones, and Shakespeare loves to do this, where somebody begins one way at the beginning of a scene and ends another way, so that we see the way that they've moved from one thing to another. So he starts up with his first real soliloquy, to be honest, in the play. We've had asides, but this is his first real soliloquy, where he weighs up the benefits and advantages of killing Duncan and then decides not to do it. He tells Lady Macbeth he's not going to do it when she comes in. And then she employs a variety of approaches to change his mind. But none seem to work. Now, I think this is something that a lot of people miss. And I know it's an interpretation, but I think a lot of people miss it in this scene. That she tries a lot of things, like attacking his masculinity and things, and they don't work. It's often said Lady Macbeth convinces him to do it by attacking his masculinity, but that's not what does it. What succeeds is that she gives him an example of how important a promise is, which reminds him of her child, which we'll get to in one of the key moments. And then she sets out the plan. So, as always, what we're going to do here is use three key moments from the scene, which, act like the extracts in the final question, and look at them closely, look at how Shakespeare writes them, in order to look at wider ideas, but also to think what we do with an extract like that. Now, in terms of the big issues underneath it, as always, I identified 7 big issues that we take throughout the play here. I would say that even though Lady Macbeth is obviously a major figure in this, and she is important, my focus would say it's Macbeth, and when it's Lady Macbeth, it's more their relationship and how it works, rather than necessarily just her. Obviously, ambition and loyalty comes into this, and gender, because we do get that approach to being a man. The first key moment. Now, this is the soliloquy. And, a soliloquy, of course, can always come up. Now, I've taken a few bits out of here. It's far too long for an individual extract. So it really is looking at the key parts of it. So it's very unlikely that this will come up as an extract. It's probable that if they did use this, it will be a part of what we've got here. So I think the key to this soliloquy, and I think what will allow you to look at it in much more of an interesting way, is not to oversimplify it. The simplified version of this is Macbeth lists off a load of reasons why he shouldn't kill the king, that basically it's wrong, and then says at the end, the only thing I've got is ambition, but I'm going to do it anyway, and then is convinced to do it anyway. But I think there's a deeper thing going on here. I don't think this is actually a soliloquy that makes Macbeth look particularly good. I think a lot of his arguments here actually aren't saying he's a good man, it's wrong to do this. They're more looking at the consequences for him and how he would be seen by others. I think this is all incredibly selfish. Okay. Early on, and consider this part of his first argument. When he's talking about if it were done when 'tis done, 'twill it were done quickly, that if there were no consequences, right? And this whole section is very much about the idea of consequences. But why is he bothered about the consequences? It's because of himself. Well, as he says here, if this blow might be the be-all and the end-all here, if I kill him and here nothing else happens, it's the end and I just become king, then I'm not concerned about the life to come, about the afterlife, about going to hell. My concern is about the success of this act and the lack of consequence here and now. Revenge, basically. And as he goes on to say in a bit here that I haven't actually put in front, he goes on to point out that the problem is those who teach bloody instructions, those instructions will return on them. In other words, he seems to be saying, if I become king by murder, then I'm showing everybody else, I'm teaching everybody else that's the way to become king, and then they'll come for me that way. So again, very, very focused on himself and the consequences. Jump off into this idea of trust, and he gives these two reasons. First of all, his kinsman is subject, then being his host. Okay, well that seems very clearly to actually be showing someone with some morality. I'm his kinsman, I'm his relative, I'm part of his family, and I'm his subject as well, as part of a king. Well, there you go, I don't commit murder then. You know, you don't kill your family, you don't kill your king. And as his host, as the fact that I'm actually looking after him, I should be protecting him. So on the surface there, you can see that these are very strong reasons morally for him not to do this, because it's going against what he should be. But it's not made clear that that's a moral thing. He says that being his kinsman's subject is strong against the deed. In whose eyes? In his or in other people's? Again, when he's talking about his host who should shut the door against his murderer and not bear the knife myself, who should be his protector, not his attacker. That word should, again, is that about social ideals? Is that how he's seen? There's not really something here that's saying it's wrong as much as he's trusting me, and if I go against that, well, that's the answer really, isn't it? Is it that if I go against that I'm wrong, or is it if I go against that people will not trust me? Now, when he carries on, he talks about Duncan being so clear in his great office. Now, again, it seems to be that a reason for not killing him is because he's been a good king. Okay? Although clear in his great office isn't quite the same. It doesn't really say, as well as the line before about bearing his faculties so meek, it seems to be about the fact that he comes over well, rather than he's actually particularly achieving anything. So what's his point here? Well, it's this carry on afterwards, isn't it? His virtues will plead like angels. And he carries this on in a very long and complex personification of pity, blowing its tears into the eyes of everybody. And that really seems to be saying that the problem is Duncan has come across well as a king, and so people aren't going to be happy when he's murdered. And that, I think, is really the heart of what Macbeth is saying here. And I think that's what comes in above it. And that's why I begin to doubt that bit above with the trust. That what he's doing is he's not looking at it and saying this is wrong. He's looking at it and saying this is not a good move for me. Okay? And then down to that bit at the end, that he has no spur to prick the side of his own intent, but only vaulting ambition which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other. And again, I have no spur, nothing to spur me on. It's not, again, about anything that is particularly moral or overcoming morals. It's that image of a spur, like that's used, the things that cowboys or riders wear on the back of their boots to dig into a horse to make them go faster. He has no spur, nothing to dig into him to make him go further and faster. The only thing he has is ambition. Now, in this wonderful image, he characterises it as vaulting. as leaping over something, vaulting over what it should be. So immediately that's suggesting it's unnatural. It's leaping over something that's in its way. And then he takes that even further and suggests that that leap is overleaping. It's going too far. And comes to this conclusion that it overleaps so much that it falls down when it goes to the other side. And of course that's not just suggesting that the ambition is immoral because it's going too far. All these links to the Jacobean beliefs of, or construction of order, and clear indications of where you stand in society. It's not just that. It's the idea that because it's so far, it will fall down. It will not succeed when he gets to the other side. So, I think we've got a very good argument here, and you can take it either way, but we've got a very good argument that all Macbeth is really doing here is saying, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to succeed. So, think to yourself, first of all, why give us Macbeth's first soliloquy at this point? Remember, prior to this, all we've had is Lady Macbeth say to him, he's going to be killed. We're going to do this. And Macbeth just going, we'll talk later about this. Why now give us a soliloquy showing us the inner workings and thoughts of his mind? And then look at those reasons and think what is being told about Macbeth's true character. Now, of course, if you do take it as a moral discussion, well then, it is suggesting to us that Macbeth is somebody we can get on board with. He's somebody who is being pushed beyond his natural ideals. But I think it's revealing much more about his pure selfishness and his pure considerations for himself. And then think very carefully about that final image about ambition and what that's suggesting. Ambition being at the heart of the play, of course. Now, the second key moment, which in my mind I feel is one that seems to me most likely in some ways to come up as an extract in a GCSE exam, because it has everything in it really that they would like. It comes from when Macbeth is joined by Lady Macbeth after the soliloquy. And it's basically where he tells her, I'm not going to do it, and she has to start persuading him. And in this opening bit, she fails. Okay. But again, some more interesting things. Right. First of all, obviously, the definitive nature of this. And this tells us a great deal about their relationship, and it tells us a great deal about the gender relationship, really. Once he says, we will proceed no further in this business, it's done. There is nothing Lady Macbeth can do but try and persuade him. She can't turn around and say, well, we'll do it anyway, or no, you're wrong. It shows where the power lies. But then it moves to her response after this. Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Her immediate response, because she's lost. She doesn't have anything else to do now apart from throw everything she can at him to get him to change his mind, which incidentally, of course, shows how strong her ambition is and how convinced she is. And the first thing she goes for is hopes. Your hopes. She uses that dressing imagery, that clothing imagery we see everywhere. Your hope of succeeding somewhere, as though appealing to those hopes will make a difference. Of course it doesn't. He doesn't react quite quickly from hope to fear, and basically says, are you scared? Are you scared to be the same in your acts as you are in your desires? I know you want this. Are you scared to actually do something to get there? And notice that word valour coming in again. Now, you could say that this is going towards cowardice, and she does in a minute talk about cowardice. But what's the central point here? It's not so much saying you're a coward, you're an idiot. It's more talking about himself. You do want this. Are you just scared to use that valour that you've got to actually achieve where you're going? So when she follows it up with, saying to him, would you happily live a coward? She's not attacking him and saying, I think you're a coward. She's saying, would you live a coward in your own esteem? It's not about her thoughts, it's about his thoughts of himself. You're going to think yourself a coward. It's very clever persuasion. Just like the fear before, she's going on to him and his own self-view. She's not throwing her own situation in there. She has said from this time, such I account thy love. But she quickly moves round to his view of himself. And then, of course, we get Macbeth's response, which is quite strict and definitive. We started with "We'll proceed no further in this business," showing where the power lies. And here, Prithee Peace is effectively saying, stop talking. You know, I don't want to hear any more. But then following it up, he does point out this thing about dare. He picks up the word dare. Small little thing that she uses there, letting I dare not wait upon I would. Collected to valour, dare. That's what he's bothered about. I dare do everything that a man would do. Whoever dares do more than that is none. And he gives her something to pick up on after that. But it shows his power and it shows what he's bothered about. Now, one other small little extract that might be worth just considering, especially if you're looking at it at a higher level, goes back to the beginning. When he says we'll proceed no further in this business, yes, he's very definitive. Yes, he's very much in control. But look at what he follows up with in terms of the reason. Now, remember, we have just heard that soliloquy in which he has given us a list of reasons. It's a soliloquy. It's what he's really thinking. It's what's in his head. But he doesn't use any of those with Lady Macbeth. He says, he's honoured me, and I've bought golden opinions from all sorts of people, which will be worn now in their newest gloss, not cast aside so soon. Another clothing imagery. He says to her, I've been given honours and I want to bask in the glory a little bit. Now that has absolutely nothing to do with what he said in his soliloquy. So he seems to be lying to Lady Macbeth. Why doesn't he give the real reasons? Why doesn't he come out and say, people expect me to be trusted, to be somebody they can trust? Why didn't he turn around and say, people won't accept me doing this to Duncan because they love him? Why didn't he turn around and say, this is going too far in the ambition? That tells us a lot more, I think, about their relationship. And Lady Macbeth will do a similar thing to Macbeth in Act 3, where she will give him a different approach to what we've just heard her say on her own. So that's well worth considering. And that might help us with the answer to this question as why he's so different with Lady Macbeth from before. It's not just why is he now being definitive about what he's saying, whereas before he just listened to her and said, yeah, we'll talk about this later. It's also, why is he feeling the need to give her excuses? And then look carefully at, again, in terms of the relationship, what Lady Macbeth thinks will change her mind. It's her husband's mind initially. Hope, fear, cowardice. Feeling that yourself. And then finally, think about that idea of masculinity. What is she trying to portray to him that he feels he needs to be as a man? And what does he come back at? That daring to do something like this is more than a man would. Now, in this absolute key scene, on to the third key moment then, which follows straight on from this. Lady Macbeth actually succeeding. Now, not for this reason, apparently. And this is what a lot of people come out with. She picks up on his idea of daring. Whoever dares more is no man. She says to him, well, when you dare to do it, then you will be a man. Then to be more than what you were, you will be so much more a man, the man. So to become king, when you dare to do it, then you'll be a man. And to become king, you'll be so much more of a man to me. So she really does go at the idea, but I don't think she's necessarily taunting him as a man, more suggesting to him, don't you think that's how a man will behave? Don't you think I'll see you more in that way? given the idea that I will think this way of you if you are more than you were. But the key thing is he doesn't react. If he does, we don't see it, but he certainly doesn't change his mind at this point. And she has to take a different... And that is where she goes for the child. She brings up this child, which remember is never mentioned again in the entire play, apart from that allusion in Act 4 where Macduff says he has no children. So what seems to be the truth then is this is a reference to a child that is no longer alive. It can't have been stillborn, she fed it, and it appears to have died. Now, of course, there's something many people will be familiar with at the time. Shakespeare lost many of his own brothers and sisters. So he'd know the impact that potentially would have. And this is what she goes for. And again, notice, like with the milk turned to gall, it's another reference to breastfeeding, to this image of motherhood, this image of the closeness between a mother and a baby. And that's what she suggests here, that this is the closest thing you could ever be, the closest you can ever be to another person, to have them actually feeding off you. And these words come in here: tender, love. Where else have we seen Lady Macbeth show any form of gentleness and emotion? Now, is that her using this? Is that us seeing a different side to her? Is it suggesting this is what Lady Macbeth used to be? Many people love to use that idea, and the idea she's been changed. And then she carries on. After that tenderness, after that gentleness, after that image of beauty, to one of the most horrific images that could possibly be invented, I would think. The idea of taking a smiling baby, a baby smiling into Lady Macbeth's face, showing its love while feeding, the closest bond there could be. And remember, a very female bond, the mother-child bond. At that point, she plucks him off her nipple, and the boneless gums just emphasises the imagery, the innocence of it, and she dashes its brains out. She doesn't just do it, she does it with extreme violence, dashing its brains out. An image of tenderness, an image of closeness, an image of mother and child, juxtaposed with an image of extreme violence and the murder of an innocent. And all to prove the point that she would do that if she had promised, if she had sworn. This is how much a promise means. And that is what changes it. That is what changes everything. Because it's then that Macbeth says, well, what if we fail? And she's got him. Once he goes to that point, she's got him. It's that bit that changes it. Now, why? Her passion, fear of her and what she's capable of, accepting what she says about promises, or is it the baby itself? Just remembering that baby, if it was his as well, though she doesn't say it that way, does it bring that up? You've got plenty of opportunities here. But Lady Macbeth is not bothered by this emotional bit. When he says if we should fail, her response is, screw your courage and stick in place and we won't fail. As long as you hold your courage, we will not fail. So, yes, the picture of Lady Macbeth as a person we're getting here. It's more about the relationship in this area, but what picture of her are we getting from what she chooses to do here, but also the two sides? Why does that approach succeed with Macbeth? And again, masculinity. She attempts to attack it, it doesn't necessarily work, she attempts to appeal to it, and then what actually does work and the way she goes with the courage at the end. This is such a key scene, there's so much going on, and it's so significant that we really want to focus in a couple of things. Again, it is Macbeth now. All the way through Act 1, we are building an impression of him. What's changed now? What have we seen in this scene? Through that soliloquy, through his approach to Lady Macbeth, through the way he's persuaded and changes. This relationship between the two of them, how does it work? How does Lady Macbeth know how to press his buttons, or maybe doesn't know how to press his buttons to begin with? We see the power and the way that works. Contrast this all the time with the previous scene, well, 2 scenes ago. Ambition. Look at the limitations and problems we see with ambition. Yes, obviously, Macbeth's ambition, when he talks about vaulting ambition. But what about Lady Macbeth's ambition? The limitations we see to her ambitions when she is suddenly left unable to achieve them because her husband has decided this isn't going to happen. And then come back to that idea of masculinity. Is it a strength, or is it almost like a weight on the back of a man? Down. As usual in Beth's character, think how this fits in with what we know about him so far and what particularly has been built up so far. And then think about anything in there which prepares us for what's to come. Anything about his behaviour, his approach there. This relationship, is this now the archetypal thing that shows us how their relationship works? With ambition, he's knocked it down. He has said it's too far, and then he follows through with it. Was he right? And then think about, again, this idea of masculinity, how it carries on after that.